So now we'll go through the common issues that are impacting the corporate tax registration process. As we mentioned earlier, the identification document. If you are already a taxable person in Emirate Tax, please make sure to update your valid identification documents such as Emirates ID and passport. And it is mandatory to upload to date document where requested in the form. For the shareholding, you need to ensure that the shareholding breakdown percentages assigned to each shareholder correspond with the actual percentages. And for the incorporation date, you must match the company's commencement date stated in the MOE. And for the tax period, please verify the appropriate tax period for your entity. And now we will go through the key takeaways. The corporate tax registration is only available to the following legal entity types, which are public joint stock companies, private shareholding companies, and other private companies such as limited liability companies who are resident in the UAE. And if you are not one of the above two entities types, do not register until you receive further guidance from the FTA. If you are already registered for VAT or excise tax, then the corporate tax registration information will be pre-populated based on the given details. And if you are already registered for VAT or excise tax, then please make sure that your registration profile details are updated in the profile. And where the Emirate tax registration profile details will need to be updated to the following documents should be ready before starting the registration process, and you will be required to update the documents where these are expired, such as the valid trade license, the business license details, the authorized signatory passport and Emirates ID copy, the proof of authorization for the authorized signatory, either a POA or MOA. For those taxpayers who are not registered for VAT or excise tax and are required to register for corporate tax, then the registration form will need to be populated by the taxpayer with all the required details. Once the registration process is completed, the FTA will review the submitted application and may require additional information in order to process your application. Upon the approval of the application, you will be notified by email and the corporate tax registration number will be issued to you. With that, we will start the Q&A session and I will hand over to my colleague Karim.
Thank you, Rhoda, for today's webinar. I believe it's very clear to everyone attending today on how to register for corporate tax. So, Rhoda, the first question for you today: which legal entities are not allowed to register for corporate tax right now?
CT registration is only available to public joint stock companies, private shareholding companies, and other private companies such as limited liability companies who are resident in the UAE. For example, sole establishment and branches of foreign companies should not register now. Therefore, if you are not one of the two eligible entity types, please do not register until you receive further guidance from the FTA, which will be communicated in the near future.
Thank you, Rhoda. Very clear. So moving to our next question, which is related to branches of a UAE juridical person. So the question is, do we need to register separately for the branches of a UAE juridical persons?
UAE juridical persons, UAE branches of a UAE juridical person are not required to separately register or file for UAE corporate tax. Branches are not separate legal persons from the head entity and therefore do not need to register separately, but the details of the branches need to be included and updated in the registration application of the head entity.
Thank you, Rhoda. Clear enough. Our next question will be related to the newly incorporated LLCs. Do they need to register for corporate tax as a newly incorporated limited liability company?
Yes, all taxable persons, including newly incorporated LLCs, should register for corporate tax.
Thank you, Rhoda. So our next question, I believe you spoke about the same point during showing out the video for registration. You spoke that most of the information will be pre-populated, but what if the existing registration data is outdated?
For applicants who are VAT registered, the system will be pre-populated certain data fields with existing information, such as owners and authorized signatory first and last names in English and Arabic. This information should be validated and, where necessary, updated for corporate tax and VAT purposes accordingly.
Thank you, Rhoda. Our next question will be for the small business relief. A lot of people is asking about the small business relief. So the question is, if I am an LLC incorporated in the UAE and want to claim the small business relief, do I still need to register for corporate tax purpose?
Yes, as prescribed by the corporate tax law, all juridical taxable persons will be required to register for UAE corporate tax and obtain a corporate tax register of the level of their revenue in the tax period.
Thank you, Rhoda. So moving from the legal person to the natural person, can a natural person register for UAE corporate tax right now?
Currently, natural persons are not required to register for UAE corporate tax. FTA will share further details in relation to natural persons corporate tax registration in the near future.
Thank you, Rhoda. Moving to the next question in regarding to tax group. The question is, how can I register a corporate tax group?
All companies will be required to register separately. Legal entities that wish to form a corporate tax group are required to register individually first and then may apply to form a corporate tax group at a later date.
Thank you, Rhoda. So taking a last question before we end our webinar for today. The question will be related to the foreign entities. So when will corporate tax registration be available to the branches of a foreign entity?
Currently, registration is available to public joint stock companies, private shareholding companies, and other private companies such as limited liability companies who are resident in the UAE. The FTA will announce when registration will be open for other entity types and when tax agents will be able to register businesses at a later date. The FTA will make sure to give ample time to companies and businesses to apply for registration and meet their legal obligations.
Thank you, Rhoda. Thank you, everyone, for attending today. Our session has come to an end.